I'd like to call the meeting of the U46 School Board to order. It's at 6:32 on Monday, the 19th of May. I had to think about what month we were, 2014. I'll read the mission statements for both CTE and for Essex High School. The Center for Technology Essex provides comprehensive technical programs for all students, which include career exploration, preparation, and technical literacy in a respectful learning environment. Students will have the opportunity to acquire skills necessary to reach their individual goals. For Essex High School mission statement, the Essex High School is a mission-driven and learning-centered community that believes, through both independent and collaborative engagement, everyone can develop excellence in their individual pursuits. We offer a rigorous and varied curriculum and believe in challenging students to think critically and act responsibly, compassionately, and respectfully. We foster individual curiosity and resourcefulness so that students can engage in their learning to achieve the behaviors, skills, and knowledge essential to becoming contributing members of their community and citizens of a diverse and ever-changing world. First on our agenda, we have visitors to be heard. I see we have visitors to be heard tonight. Just for the board's information, we have on our agenda tonight a topic later on motorcycle driver education. We've had a request from our visitors to present motorcycle driver education up front, so we will listen to your statements, but we won't be rearranging agendas. We'll be coming back and discussing this as a board topic at 7:15, because I understand you have a need to leave earlier this evening. So without further ado, we'll turn the floor over to you.
I'm Joan Wong Ignazuski. I was here before. For being very kind to do that for me. I did just go through an operation and I am feeling kind of weak. What I'm going to do is my talking points and the other information, I'm just going to leave it with Judith, and she can hand it out to all of you.
Thank you.
There is a letter in there from Green Mountain Harley, and I have two more letters to bring from Frank's Motorcycles and from Land Air, Don Ehrlich. But my computer, I'm still having problems with it, and I couldn't get them to print. So I do have them. I do want the board to have them, so I will print them and get them to Judith as soon as I can within the next day or so, okay? So I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak on behalf of J&J. We're an L3C following the 501c3 laws of Vermont. Our tax returns are on file at 319 South Main Street in St. Albans. The reason where I'm here is concerning a noise issue that was brought up to you in January. I think I explained before that I thought that this noise issue had been resolved. Robin Hullweedle, Lieutenant Robin Hullweedle of the Essex Junction Police, did an investigation, came back to us along with Bruce Murdo, and explained that to solve the issue, we would have to start later in the morning. And so instead of starting at 7 o'clock in the morning, we started at 9 o'clock in the morning. We didn't hear anything for the rest of the year, so we assumed that this issue had been resolved. We've been using this parking lot since 2010. I think I explained this to you without any noise issue. In 2013, I did offer an advanced course, and I think I explained this to you guys earlier, on one weekend for the first time as a pilot course for the Essex Junction Police who ride motorcycles in their jobs. So these are larger bikes. They do meet the state of Vermont decimal meter readings for their exhaust. They all had stock exhaust on, but it was the only course that was going to be accessible to these people in the state of Vermont. They asked me to see if I could try to put it on, and that's what we did, was just try it as a pilot program. What I'm asking you is to please, and I'd get on my knees if I thought I could get back up off them, to please allow J&J to continue past 2014, and we will make as many concessions as you would like us to do. And I'll explain why in a moment. We're only going to ask for 6 courses for the whole year. We'll only put 8 students in a class. We're going to stop offering the advanced course so that we don't have big bikes out there in the parking lot. We would like to offer a couple courses during the week to accommodate the noise issue on the weekend. We'd like to have 2 courses, maybe be it on a Saturday, only if Sunday is a cause of the noise issue, or start at 10 a.m. on Sunday. And as in the past, to only allow motorcycles who meet the Vermont decimal meter reading for motorcycles. Our motorcycles, I'm going to have them tested by the Essex Police and make sure that they meet those standards for this school, so that we're not having any motorcycles that are not going to be beyond standard. And to stop offering courses to students who have their own motorcycles unless they meet that Vermont decimal meter reading. And J&J is going to be purchasing a decimal meter. We're asking not for a concession from J&J, but a request that members of this board either take or attend a course before you make a final decision concerning our fate. Because I really would like to have you see it firsthand rather than just by me talking. I'm making these proposals as I have looked and looked, and there's not a parking lot the size or the condition of Essex to hold training. And I've listed every lot that I've gone to in here, and I'm not going to go over them because I know you have lots of things to do. But they're in that letter that I've given to the talking points to Judith. In essence, I'd like J&J Motorcycle Driver Education School to be treated and viewed by the board with the same high level, or even more so, as a top priority educational offering for the school, just as motor vehicle driver education training, because of the lack of protection offered by motorcycles used on Vermont highways. Essex students and those within the community have increased access to riding motorcycles because of the 3 dealerships located within the community who are trying to be responsible by helping J&J with the use of their sites for classroom. The benefit to Essex High School is that they can use J&J in their grant writing, as we are state and nationally recognized and certified as a motorcycle driver education school. Plus, we have found while we're out there in that lot, we have kept some people out of that lot that were going to be up to no good. We do that when we're there. We don't allow shenanigans to go on, okay? I would, however, like to have, I think John Fitzgerald has something he wants to briefly say, and my husband, Doug, who grew up in Essex and went to Essex High School. So I'll turn it over to that.
Hi, my name is Doug Ingaszewski. I'm Joanne's husband, as she just said. My family's lived here in the village for 60 plus years. And I did graduate from the Essex High School in 1967. I bought my first motorcycle in 1966. 2 weeks after I got my driver's license, I went down to the Honda dealer, I got on it, I had never been on one before. Within 3 months, I had 2 accidents. One was very serious. I was approaching 5 corners. There was a car coming towards me with his directional on. But at the same time, there was a classmate walking up the sidewalk. I turned around and waved like this on my motorcycle, and when I turned back, that car was in front of me. I wish at that time I had taken this course, this motorcycle safety course. It may have made me a little more aware of what that can do. It's a very valuable course for anybody involved in motorcycle riding, whether they're new or experienced. If that course was available to me at the time, I would have been more aware of the risks and possibly not had that accident and caused myself serious injury. That's why I became an instructor, so that I could pass this on to other people and make them aware of this risk. This is a very important program that we're trying to run. I don't know if any of you have anybody approaching 16 years old, going to get their license, might want a motorcycle. Think about it. You know, it's a very, very valuable course. We do save lives and serious injuries. And this is a premier parking lot for us to do it. It's probably, if not the best one in the state, one of the best in the state. And we value this parking lot very much and would very much like to continue using it. Thank you very much.
My name is John Fitzgerald. I'm a resident in the town of Milton, and I'm also a rider coach for J&J Motorcycle Safety. When I first bought a motorcycle, I was riding the APGAT, corners way beyond my skill level. Went off the road down into a ditch, and it was not a good experience. I took the course with Joanne shortly after and learned quite a bit about cornering and handling tough situations, which is why I became a rider coach, to save lives. I have friends that in high school passed away on motorcycles, and that's what we're here to do. We're here to save your students' lives, your residents' lives. So I was here tonight to read a letter from my grandfather, who I guess presented his letter already.
You did,
So-
and we'll distribute this
Yep.
to the board, so.
Certainly, he wasn't able to make it tonight, but, so, that's all I have.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Ms. Charbonneau, are you here for visitors to be heard this evening too?
I
or-
believe I need to wait for the 7:15 motorcycle driver education, is that
Okay,
true?
no, that's
Just for clarification.
fine. We're just, right now, we will be following our agenda and having the 7:15 motorcycle driver education discussion then for the board, but it's our chance for the Ignazewskis and J&J, or it is to talk to us tonight about the motorcycle safety course, because they need to get
Then I
started.
guess can I address them through your,
No, I would prefer that we
Okay.
wait because this has been a warned meeting and
Okay, thank you.
we'll follow what our
You
agenda
just say
is.
when and all.
Okay, thank you, and thank you this evening for coming and presenting that to us. Is there any other topic for our visitors tonight to be heard? Hearing none, then we'll go on to our principals' reports then, and actually, how about we'll start with our Director of Center for Technology of Essex Director. Thank you.
So, just focus on a few things in the report. You have in my report a copy of the draft action plan for Center for Technology Essex. In my report, I mentioned that I would be ready to bring numbers from my final Perkins report for the local plan development at tonight's meeting, but I'm going to hold off on that because I think we're going to take the June meeting to talk about action plan, and I don't want to I don't want to slow things down. I will say though that the process that we go through to draft our action plan includes our local plan, which is an improvement plan required to receive our Perkins budget money. So the indicators that I mentioned in my principals report, kneecap math and reading, which will at some point be SBAC math and reading, technical skills attainment, non-traditional student enrollment and completion, post-secondary placement, industry recognized credentials. Those are all reported to me through the Perkins process. So those are the numbers that I'll be focusing on when I go through the action plan. A quick highlight of the action plan, we are absolutely focusing on three main areas. Improvement in academic achievement, improvement in technical skills achievement, and improvement in non-traditional enrollment and enrollment and completion. And that's the language that we use as part of the Perkins plan. It ties very tightly into all of the initiatives that we've been running at CTE for now, I guess it will be a third year running. I'm looking at my action plan as an extension of the 2-year action plan that we've been working on last year and the previous year. So we'll be reviewing that with staff for a final sign-off very soon. We had our annual Girls Can 2 event. We actually had a Boys Can 2 event as well. The Girls Can 2 event was lengthened into 2 days in an attempt to increase participation by all our sending middle schools. Participation was off a little bit this year. We still did more than we did last year, more sending schools and more students. We were hoping to have worked with over 80 girls over 2 days, but given the time of the year, we're finding middle schools are pretty busy right now. So our participation was off a little bit. Great feedback again, wonderful photos, great time to spend with the young women. We this year tried a Guys Can 2 event, a little bit different conversation with boys around non-trad programs for them. Would be focusing on childhood education and healthcare, cosmetology. We were able to actually do a pilot that included 4 Milton boys. We were hoping to do a pilot that included 12. We couldn't get that kind of participation. Again, I think it's time of year, but I also think it's a different kind of conversation for boys than it is for girls. Schools are not as ready to have the conversation about their boys in non-trad programs like they are ready to have conversations about their girls in non-trad programs. But it's a commitment of the center, and we'll continue to work on that. We learned a lot by working with those 4 young men, and we plan on forging ahead and offering a Guys Can 2 again next year. You'll notice that we have a number of departing members of the staff, some retirements, some second retirements, and some just moving on. You see that list in my report. So that means there are a few key positions that we're working on to fill. We're making headway and we're working hard. I mentioned in my report about how CTE goes about ensuring that the student handbook information is communicated and signed off. I shared with you a slide presentation in the report. Essentially, for the last 2 years, we've had 100% sign off on our student handbooks. We verified that by 3rd or 4th week in September. Those students who aren't signed off, we meet with directly, and we tell them they can't continue to participate unless we have their signatures. A key motivator for us is part of those signatures includes health forms, and a lot of students aren't allowed on field trips or field work unless we have their health form signed off. So I think we have a little bit more leverage than in a typical high school. Within the first week, we as administrators go into our programs and we review all of the key points about the student handbook. We do not review the entire handbook. I cannot guarantee you that the signature means that they've all read the handbook, even though that's what the signature says. But the key policies that we find ourselves returning to a few times during the year are the policies that we highlight with the students, such as closed campus and weapons and attendance, our drug policy as opposed to what they might be used to at their sending high school, although a quick review of what our sending high schools are doing a couple weeks ago shows that the trend is more towards what CTE has been doing for the last 15 years, which is required testing policy to remain in good standing in the school. So it's not as out of the ordinary as it used to be with our students. So, and then I included a copy of the letter home that we sent in the middle of this past year, reminding families about weapons policies around hunting season. We've returned to that a couple times this year, just to remind them as we this spring as we entered turkey hunting season. So I think we have a pretty proactive approach to making sure our students understand the policies, but we're open to any recommended changes that would improve that. The last piece you saw, something I'd like the board to know, we actually had a really positive competition season this year on top of Skills USA, which I've reported about already. Ford AAA competition went very well. And in fact, you'll see one of our students from MMU received a full scholarship to Central Maine Community College for having the highest written score on the written test. And as well, Natural Resources, one of our teams received $2,000 each scholarships for their placement, and that is at the University of Northwestern Ohio. So it's a good time for CTE students. We're working hard. It's always feels busy at this time of year. Students are focused. And one last thing I would say is recognition night this year will be at the rink instead of at the fairgrounds. We're returning to save a little money, but also to make it more convenient for students and staff instead of running back and forth between the fairgrounds and here. The main focus or the main concern right now is parking, because that week may be affected by playoffs if baseball, softball, and lacrosse have good runs. We have a backup plan if that's the case, and this is the first year I think in about 12 years that we're going to limit student and family attendance to 6 plus the student. So we'll see how that goes. That's my report. Welcome any questions.
Do we have any questions for?
Just one.
Yes, sir.
Based upon, well, it's clear to me that there are different family situations, married, divorced, separated, guardians, etc.
Yeah.
How do you feel about having separate approval of the school policy notice for this divergent kind of environment that we're seeing?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question, especially with our population, because you know our free and reduced is higher, and you know our students living in 2-parent families tends to be a little bit higher on average than typical high school. I think it's a fair question. I'm not sure that would answer some of the obvious concerns or problems, which is, did they read it and do they understand it? We always come to that problem or that hurdle regardless of whether they've signed it or not. And even if we had multiple parents signing off, well, I think actually it would slow down our success rate of getting the sign-offs, and I'm not sure it would lead to a higher understanding of what our policies and procedures are. I think the best way to do that is through relationship. I think we could make improvements through our family night at the beginning of the year, and I think we can continue and even build out a little bit more the conversations we have directly with students, so that they understand. It's very helpful. We had a concern about shotgun shells a couple of weeks ago, and it was gratifying to have the student refer to the letter. When I asked him, now I see the shells, can I search your car for the weapon? He said, I don't have the weapon. You're welcome to search the car. You sent the letter. I know I shouldn't have it. I bought these at the store last night and I just forgot to bring them in. So it was gratifying to know that the student had read the letter and was referring to it. I think those steps are the most important.
And I would just comment that I was really gratified to see, in response to our, request for more information about this, that I feel like it's a 3-pronged approach. You're making sure that it is signed off on, you're reinforcing the key points, and then you're even taking this additional proactive measure of sending out the letter during the hunting season, which I just thought was really, I know that it's just not a perfect scenario of always knowing that people are always definitely fully reading it, but at least I felt like the school was really doing just about as much as they could. I know that the electronic component is like another layer we could add, but while that's still getting tweaked and worked out, I felt like this was really a great way to approach it, so.
Thank you. Any other questions for Director Travers? I just, one comment to the board. Having attended the last several recognition nights on June 10th, I really encourage board members, if they have a chance, to come out that evening, even though seating may be limited, as I understand here. It's a very special evening for a very special group of people, and I think you would appreciate seeing, and hearing the good work that they're doing, and seeing them recognized for the things that they've done. So, thank you for that. Okay. Principal Reardon, the floor is yours.
Okay, so just a brief comment on the action plan to start with, even though we're going to spend more time obviously in June, but it is also a draft, as well as the visuals that I sent as well, draft form, just to give you an idea of the work at hand moving forward. And with the visual that listed the 8, if you will, buckets of work, we tried to identify leadership, teacher leaders, in terms of who's going to be leading the charge based upon the task at hand moving forward for the 2014-15 school year. And then on the backside, we tried to show where there's a lot of crossover interrelationships between the work ahead. As Bob indicated, which I think is an excellent point, this is certainly a continuation from the 2 years that we're currently wrapping up now with the NEASC report and global best practices work and Ed quality standards being passed January of this year, which has implications in terms of proficiency-based learning and reporting down the road for us, and next-gen science standards and Common Core, and I probably forgot a few. So there still is work to do with our staff to finalize this and wrap it up. In terms of SBAC, I couldn't be more complimentary of the staff, and also Amy Cole from Central Office lending support with Kim Gower and Erica LeClaire, Carrie Fogg, to try and get us ready for this pilot, which is going to occur 2 days from now, assessment, and then on the 28th and 29th, the performance tests respectively for math and English language arts. We're going to have a team from the Agency of Education here, because we're the largest entity in the high school that's doing it all in this window of time, so they're looking to learn from us as we're looking to learn. We're going to be having our teachers who are in the room be really heightened observers. We're going to be talking to our students who are taking the assessment so that we can learn, because this is a significant change using technology as the vehicle to answer the questions moving forward. So there'll be more to come, and how this goes in terms of the time allotted and what it actually plays out will be very educational for us as we look to schedule spring of 2015, when every school in the state will be moving to the SBAC assessment. But there has been no shortage of hours going into this, I can assure you. So more to come on that. In terms of other items to talk about, in terms of the grading scale question, this was posed to our teachers after the first of the year, after the Ed quality standards had been passed, and it led to a very robust discussion, but there were far too many questions that were going to be unanswered given the other layers of work we had ahead of us at the mid-year point. And I'll just read some of the questions that some of the content areas were asking in terms of, peeling the onion back a little bit, in terms of keeping our grading scale 70 to 100 or moving it to 60 to 100. Some of the questions raised were how are students affected by this in the college process? What criteria are used in scholarships that would exclude our students? Do colleges look at the school profile that explains our grading scale? What happens to students who get 60% and don't pass the course currently? Does our scale encourage students to work harder to pass? was the original rationale for the 70 to 100 scale to quote-unquote raise standards. Is 60% of the material really enough to award credit for a course? What does a 60% portfolio look like at another school? Does the number really reflect effort and progress? Are admission decisions based on the number or the conversion? Many teachers felt fine about weighing their own opinion, but they also indicated, which is what we will be starting to do in the fall, that if we're going to make a if we were going to consider making a significant change, that there would certainly be a community-wide discussion as well, which would include parents, probably higher ed without any question, obviously teachers, students, and some even suggested alumni who are recently in college and out of college. How will this grading scale affect our practice? What kind of support would we need to make the shift, professional development, time, etc., in terms of other questions? So those were just some of the questions. There were others, but those were some of the ones that seemed to repeat themselves from content area to content area. And folks were, in terms of registering an opinion, given the fact that there were a lot of unanswered questions and the fact that proficiency-based learning and reporting is now a must-do, not a may-do, based on the ed quality standards, a significant number felt it would be more of a distraction to do something short-term when we're going to have to do that body of work moving forward anyways to get to where we need to be at the latest by 2020. At the same time, ADL and EMS are moving to proficiency-based reporting starting in the fall of 2014. So those report card instruments will be important for us to study as we look to move forward on our end in terms of the high school piece, to make sure we're using common language and terms so as not to confuse the public and each other. In terms of the handbook, what we attempted to do this summer, which of course looked really good in the summer, was to have an electronic sign-off for parents and tie that into the Power School portal, the parent portal, since that has been highly accessed and utilized by not only students but parents. And what we found, and I indicated this a little bit in the report, is that for certain populations that wasn't happening, and I highlighted the ELL population because there are significant comprehension situations. And then unfortunately there was a significant, or I should say not a significant, a small percentage, but a percentage nonetheless that caused concern that even when contacted as a follow-up after a month into school, when their student couldn't get into the portal, they weren't really concerned about signing off on it and entering it from the parent perspective. So that led to some issues, and we ended up opening it up to all after about a month, and we didn't get 100% sign-off. Moving forward, though, with advisory from the student perspective, our first day of school is August 27th, which is a Wednesday, which is when we have advisory. So very easily, the first thing that we will cover in advisory for all students will be the main policies that we often meet on in terms of weapons, substances, and for us we'll touch dress code and closed campus. And we can cover those easily in one advisory period and have students sign off on it. I am meeting with Mike Meyer to look at a different way for perhaps parents to, with proactive reach out to those like ELL parents that may need some translation for this year to get a higher percentage of parents to sign off electronically, so we're not chasing down 1,300 pieces of paper. So very optimistic with the students. There's no reason why we can't get 100% participation now with advisory as 100% participation in terms of day one if students are in attendance. The parent piece, I need to work with Mike a little bit more to see if we can make that smoother for this year. But certainly we like the idea of an electronic sign-off rather than a paper sign-off. In terms of the climate results, and I know this is later on, just a comment, I was very disappointed in terms of the participation rates for this particular iteration of the climate survey. It seems like we were down in all areas and significantly down in our staff participation, which surprised me with the 2-week window that was available for people. So I think in terms of creating action steps for next year, the data is there and we can look at it, certainly, but with the participation rates being so minimal, it's hard to put a lot with it, although I would say that, we trended positively, and like we did last year, in a vast majority of all the areas, and there were some where we trended neutral, but none was trending negatively. So, but we've got to get more participation moving forward. And 2 last comments. We had 3 folks, Leanne Smith, Joe Chase, and Andrew Roy. Andrew Roy is one of our new counselors this year. He also was the STEM director at North Country High School, where he came from. They just got back from New Orleans attending a 3-day national STEM conference, and talked to all 3 individually. We haven't had a chance to meet together, but they felt it was a really worthwhile endeavor and got a lot of good ideas of STEM education moving forward and how to improve what we have. And we have gone from 4 students to 40 in terms of signups from this year to next, so that's certainly a good sign. And lastly, last Friday we had a Vermont League of Innovative School meeting at the Sheridan in Burlington, and schools from throughout the state were represented, and good updates were provided by the Agency of Education. Opportunities for next steps in terms of the New England Secondary School Consortium, and all the meeting dates for next year were given so that we can let our staffs know before they leave, so they can attend the Roland Foundation Conference in October, and the 3 opportunities for the New England Secondary School Consortium, which will include proficiency-based learning and reporting information as we move forward. So that's what I have.
Okay. Thank you, Rob. Do we have questions for Principal Reardon? Al?
Just wanted to ask one question.
Sure.
The participation rate for the existing sign-off, was my understanding, was about 50%
You're talking about,
per last year?
are we talking the climate survey? Or the,
No, the student
handbook.
sign-off,
oh, the handbook, I'm sorry.
I think the participation rate the previous year was about 50%.
With the last time we did pen and paper, yeah, it was about that.
So your target then is for
It's-
100% first day?
With the students, yes. We're still scratching our heads on how to get the parents sign off.
Yeah, because it seemed to me that with only 50% of the students participating on the portal, that the manual sign-off would be more effective.
Well, we're hoping it will be, yeah.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
What's the plan to improve the climate participation rate? 'Cause that was-
We had the 2-week window, unfortunately, with the students during our advisory time. Besides sending the communication out, they could take it anytime they wanted. We thought of doing that in advisory, but there are already activities planned during that 2-week window. The other complicator is we have all the students. My advisory is right on the other side of the library there. We have 1 computer for the kids, so we would, not every advisory location has the technology. The parents, I guess, will have to do, depending on when the window is we would have to get more opportunities, laptops, for if we have it during parent-teacher conferences, to allow them to access it there to increase numbers. But maybe Front Porch Forum, we can push out more information. We had information going out, but evidently it was not sufficient.
Okay.
And the staff, I was really surprised at that drop-off. I just was. I surprised.
They're probably just busy,
Yeah.
other prior
Yeah.
commitments, so. Yeah, it's as if we need it somewhere in some central place where it can be accessed easily and more readily.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Brian?
Yes, I had a chance to share some thoughts ahead of time, so I've to try to save some time tonight, but I would like to share some additional thoughts this evening with regards to the grading
Mhm.
policy. I think the questions you shared, Rob, that came up from the teachers at some point this year regarding the grading system are great questions. And I think without answers to those questions, I can understand how there'd be some concerns with making a change. I think they're great questions to ask of our current system. And I think they raises some concerns to have our current system in place without getting those answers. I think maintaining status quo is a comfortable position. And I think that it often doesn't undergo the scrutiny that some type of progress or change undergoes.
True.
I think that the change, this idea that every change needs to undergo some type of large stakeholder kumbaya, is not a common practice that we have. This board was involved with a catch-up practice to move our policy to catch up to a practice of our graduation requirements. Our current practice at the school was different than our existing policy of graduation, and the board had to catch up to that. Our graduation requirements therefore had changed without any stakeholder involvement, without any large involvement, without a discussion by the board. And I'd say that, with graduation requirements being a significant item, I would say that it's equal to a grading policy. So obviously we can make changes with a rather expedient basis of just change. So we've got past practice that shows us that.
Mhm.
You pointed out that ADL and EMS are in the process of changing, which means that the few sending schools that this grading system used to make sense to, it no longer will. So that, the last group of people that the grading system will make sense to will be the adults in this building. Because the students used to have this grading system from grades 7, 6, 7, and 8.
Mhm.
But, now that will go by. They'll be proficiency based.
Yes.
And they'll experience a 70 to 100 grading scale for the first time when they become freshmen. In 2 more years, that will be the
Yes,
case.
in 2 more years, yes.
So,
Yep.
so that will be the case in 2 years, unless we will convert to proficiency-based reporting in 2 years for freshmen, which I'm not sure if that's the case. So,
No, I think that would be an optimistic timeline.
yeah. So we will have a collision there of one of the last group of people that are familiar with it as far as students. So we'll be introducing 100% of our students in 2 years to a brand-new grading scale come their
A high
freshman year.
percentage of the islands, Georgia, and Westford will not be in proficiency-based,
But they'll be in a different grading scale.
perhaps.
Yeah, well, Westford doesn't use the EHS grading scale.
No. Yep.
So, I think that the greatest element here is time is a precious resource. We have to pick our battles. I understand that probably better than every other element of the argument. But, there is a real impact that I think has a real underside to it that I'm not sure if we've understood, that it isn't only the impact of maybe the kids that get the chance to talk about whether they're maybe get to apply for a merit scholarship, and because they get a 2.5 they don't get one, but having zeros within our grading scale, having the 70s and so forth, I think that there's, from the literature and the research, I think there's a whole unintended consequence that has an underbelly in this grading scale and in our grading system and in the inconsistencies that I'm afraid that if we don't look at it and think that we're going to be able to leapfrog from this to proficiency, it's going to take all the way until 2020, if not further and further and further. So, as I said in my message to the board, that's my 10 cents. I'm passionate about it. It's not new. This is just the latest voice since 2009. So I guess it needs a choir or a chorus. It's important. There are kids and consequences, and it does matter. I would like to find the proponents of it, not the people that question it or need more information, but the people that say, this is what I stand for, and I want this at Essex High School. That's who I need to hear from as a board member.
Okay.
And I think one thing that I would just like to add on this is that, in my opinion, I do feel that, I'm a huge advocate of, opening the aperture and having, public buy-in on a variety of different topics. But I do feel that this is an issue, a topic that needs to be resolved by the educational leadership that we have. I don't think that we need to have community forums. I think that this is absolutely something that should be discussed and we should be given direction and information from the leadership that we have in the district and in the school. That's my 2 cents worth on that.
And I have a new board member, and maybe just clarifying, but you say it's optimistic timeline to say in 2 years that we could change to a proficiency based.
No, I don't think it'll happen that quick. Most schools that
So
make
it's
the
not
transition.
optimistic, it can happen.
Most
Is there a time that it could, is there some, is it something, well, I don't understand, and that isn't for right now to discuss, but I don't understand, how do we get that in sync, and is there a way to move that forward?
The Ed Quality Standards state that current 6th graders, by the time they graduate, will have this system
Current
to
sixth
allow
graders.
schools the time to do the work necessary to make this change.
Current sixth graders. Okay, thanks.
So what I'm hearing from the board is an interest in guiding this policy or this practice. If that's the direction, I think that we need to hear that from the board. I think as board members, you can certainly take a position, and leadership will further discuss with faculty and staff the board wishes, whether it's the timeline concern with it or an understanding of what proficiency-based learning looks like, feels like, and is evaluated. It's new ground, so we're finding our way through that, and I think there's a bit of confusion between when I hear their middle level is using proficiency-based learning. I think I would call that standards-based reporting. They're reporting on standards, and through some proficiency-based opportunities, they're being evaluated. I think that it would be helpful to have a presentation on proficiency-based learning and evaluation to better inform board about what pathway we're on and where we're going, so that the timeline can be better understood. But I see the grading scale as a separate issue to that. I think the opportunity to evaluate based on grades is something that's changing. That there'll be proficiency-based standards that will be grading on through rubrics and demonstrations versus testing that has numeric quantitative results. And that switchover right now, to switch that from the current method, I can appreciate the concerns. If you wanted to say by such and such a date in 2 years, you look for that switch. I think it's important for administration to know the wishes of the board, and if you'd rather have a presentation first before we revisit this topic, that might be helpful too.
The timeline would be significant in how the action plan would be finalized. Because we would have to, we would need to shift work to be really focused and directed there if we wanted to have a quick turnaround.
Well, I guess to be fair, if I can understand the administration's timeline, I mean, obviously it was clear that the grading scale was an interest. It was expressed an interest. It was brought to the faculty, the teachers, some group or all, inclusive, comprehensive. It was discussed. It was decided that more information was needed. So is it stop? Is it more? What's the timeline with that?
With the grading bit?
Yeah, so I guess yours comes up to there, but I'm not sure if that what happens with your report kind of comes up and has a hang to it. So is it over? Now, so does the faculty now switch on to proficiency?
Where we got with the conversation was, with all the work that we had ahead of us this semester, if we were to devote more attention to that, answering some of the questions that were presented, we would have had other things suffer, like the SBAC training, Common Core, Next Gen Science Standards. So it wasn't because of lack of interest of pursuing the 60 to 100. The fact that EQS, the Ed Quality Standards, stated that. So folks said, well, we're going to be on this path anyways. So I don't want to say it was that for that, but it was, if we're going to focus on proficiency-based reporting, that's what we want to be focusing on. And not, I don't want to say it was a distraction, but the 60 to 100 as compared to 70, 100, once that conversion is made, the 70, 100 is gone. And habits of mind are incorporated, and it's a total transformation of evaluation and assessment.
So the action plan picks up next year on a proficiency-based transition.
Starting the transition, yes. Yeah, Colleen Berner is one of faculty members that's very interested and passionate about this topic, who has attended conferences with me at Manchester and Boston.
And then, so the intention would be any discussion on grading scale or grading reform at this point in time would be invested in the transition to proficiency-based.
That was the feeling. Not saying it wasn't important, but when you have limited time to allocate towards focus and
Just
work.
helpful to clarify that
Yeah.
timeline if we're asking to clarify the board's interest, intent, and timeline.
I think if you wanted to have a more focused conversation by the faculty, then that would, on the 60 to 100, then proficiency base would be pushed probably to 2020 because of the other buckets that you have in that visual aren't going away in terms of the work that we have to do. So it's not, like I say, it's not that people didn't feel that that was important, a discussion. It was, do we take time away from one for the other? That was kind of the feeling.
Yeah.
I would very much like to be educated more on the proficiency-based. But I can't, I guess there's one thing my brain is a little stuck on, which is, let's just say that our grading system is potentially meaning that some of our students are in a disadvantageous position, say compared with some of the other schools in the area as far as getting things like scholarships. So does that mean that our grade's gone? In other words, aren't kids still going to need an X to get X?
That's
So-
the work that's happening now.
What's going on with the New England Secondary School Consortium, which we've been part of for 5 years now, is part of their work, they're based out of Portland, Maine, is they are going around meeting with higher education throughout New England and getting colleges and universities to sign off on accepting proficiency-based transcripts, because the most common pushback from community, parents, and some boards would be, well, what am I used to? I'm used to numbers and or letters. And what does this mean? And how will that put my son or daughter at a disadvantage when I'm applying for college? So they've done some very good work in terms of communicating and getting colleges and universities to sign off and, yeah, we accept this, we accept homeschool students, all their individual transcripts, private schools, parochial schools, everything in between. So,
Is it just the Northeast?
no. But this is the NESSE just this spring, because of the collective work, was awarded significant Gates money because of the transformative work that's underway.
And are private schools also responsible to switch over to by 2020?
No. Well, no. No, the Rices and the MSJs and St. Johnsbury's, no.
Because I'm just thinking from the timing perspective, you know, I mean, as proficiency-based rolls out, I mean, you still have perhaps 2 or 3 classes of students that could, I guess I just feel, I'd love to just get some more information, as Brian indicated, and maybe on the other side of, is there also a contingent that's really advocating for this as well? I think it'd be really interesting to kind of hear both, you know, the questions, but also hear the other side, because if this is something that's kind of been sort of discussed for a number of years now, I guess I would kind of weigh in on, you know, let's just make some sort of a decision, because I think if there is the potential for some of the students not, you know, being harmed or losing out, you know, even if as we're moving towards proficiency for the next 2 or 3 years, we could align them and have them be having the playing field be level. But obviously I do need to be educated more on some facets of this, but I really think it's something that we might want to be more expedient about, you know. And obviously I wasn't in on some of the early conversations about this topic, but.
So what do we as a board want out of administration on this specific topic? Do we want an understanding of proficiency-based standards at our next board meeting?
I think I'd kind
Do
of
we-
like that regardless, but I think as far as the grading goes,
Right.
I think I'd just like to understand maybe more of what, it sounds like, Rob, you know, you did have that conversation.
Yeah, we used basically the information from Michelle Rath and Tim Root the last time it was presented to the school council when that was in existence in 2009, and the letter from Mrs. Astor that was sent and submitted, and also in the Essex Reporter, same letter, as a catalyst for conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd just love to know kind of, I mean, what are your thoughts, Brian? I guess I'd kind of love to know, what do the teachers, I'd really love to know what the teachers think about it, as far as kind of the spectrum of what their thoughts are on the topic.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I think I put in there that I think in everything that we do, there should be a reasoned and researched backing of what we do. And I'm sure that there's a reasoned and researched backing for a 70 to 100 scale and how we currently execute our grading system. I think and I'm sure it has its proponents. And, I think, a reasonable discussion should take place about it. Right now, what's happened for me in the last year and a half or 2 years in talking about it has been the raising of concerns about the change. Does it dumb us down? Are we creating mediocrity? Why do we need to be like others? Are we really, aren't all the schools around here already know about our grading scale? Aren't we already adjusting? I haven't heard, really the arguments for it. There's some great research. There was the number of states have moved to statewide grading scales. A number of states have moved to minimum gradings, minimum grades. I mean, there's some great research out there from all the top, from the places that we're getting educational leadership teams, and all the places that we are pulling research from to develop our schools are doing research on grading right now. So I think there's probably some great stuff that we can become more informed about. And it's really the same research that's where proficiency-based reporting is from. Could be part of the planning day, or it could be in.
That's exactly what I was thinking too. Planning day might be an excellent time to.
So maybe a presentation on the pros and cons of our current grading scale. And then we could do the proficiency presentation after that. Is that?
That sounds good. I mean, then it kind of lays out for you. I think the only concern I have is that with proficiency-based, with 83% of our students being successful in postgraduate education, then and moving on to college, that I want to make sure that we don't change something that significantly affects that readiness. That's one of the biggest concerns, that it's an improved process rather than what we're doing now. Because that would be a huge impact. And we already get student feedback, and we know that our existing processes are successful. So that 70% sets a higher bar, but you're taking something away when you leave too. So just a thought. Okay.
Yeah, it's a pretty fascinating subject. It's a mathematical. I think that 70% is a pretty challenging bar, especially if a 0 is ever included into the averaging.
Right.
Because it takes 6 perfects to bring you over that bar.
Yep.
So there's not too many places in the world that you need to be perfect 6 times after you've missed once. Certainly.
It depends on what the bar is, because the calculations was off in that article, which I found lacking in many respects. But let me first share, I'm all with you with this whole 70 to 100. I think it's just putting our students at a disadvantage, and to sit and just wait it out until we get something else this time I'm not in favor of. The whole proficiency, I think, is going to bring as many problems as it's supposedly going to solve. But if you look at the example, you used the 6 out of 7, where he said if you get 1 0, it takes 9 perfects to recover. Okay, so if each project's worth 10 points, you get a 0, you get 9 on each one, that's 90 out of 100, that's an A. That's more than just recovering. If you just want to get a recover in terms of passing, then you only need 6.8. So a high D on each of the following assignments to recover. So I think that, I'm not sure where the numbers came from, but it doesn't add up that way. Depends on what recover means. If you mean if I get a 0, can I ever get an A? That might be hard, but you can certainly recover. But I mean, this is not a place
Yeah.
for a debate, but this is.
Yeah.
But I do, if we go back to the grading, I'm with you. I share
Yeah.
your same passion.
Yeah.
As I think sitting, doing nothing, I don't think that's the best choice.
Yeah.
But and what resonated with me when I read that article is it for the learner to get to a 2 from a 1 is psychologically an easier thing than to get from a 0 to a 70 or a passing grade. It's this appreciative inquiry and the framing of it in a positive way, and instead of in the failure-based model, how about the success model, which might be something also to be included in a presentation for change. Positive is.
So the planning day, pros and cons, is that what I heard? I just want to be clear on what I heard.
Sounds good.
I think that's what I heard.
And,
Okay.
and a proficiency-based, I think Amy Cole
After
could
the
work with
planning
us.
day. So like
At planning
August?
day? At planning
I
day?
don't know. I'm thinking maybe, I don't know. Just my opinion. But I'm thinking maybe on planning day, we can focus on the grading. And I think maybe the proficiency base would be a nice presentation for, say, August. Or
August?
Do you
Just,
have-
that's only my opinion.
Do you have 2 schools? We have a carousel coming up. Do you have both? Is ADL and Westford both in the midst
It's
of
already
Okay.
8
6th
hours.
grade proficiency-based
We could probably do
reporting
both.
stuff right now?
Yes.
Is there any value in bringing is there any kind of 2-for-1
For
process?
carousel, we already have carousel planned
Okay.
as far as multi-tiered system of supports, presentation and framework we're working on. But certainly, we can review a carousel in August. We've had those in the past. And we could share what those standards-based report cards are looking like. K through 5, that's still in revision, even at the K-5 level, and this is the 3rd year. 4th year, actually. And middle schools, this coming year is their 1st year of that transition. So it's moving through the system. I don't think we have it down anywhere in the system though yet. And I don't think we're the exception either.
No.
I think the transition is across the nation and certainly our state. And we've been getting smarter about it, on understanding what it is, and that's where the teachers find themselves. So I can appreciate from the perspective that it felt like a pathway off a target that they were already shooting for. But I can also understand and appreciate the board's perspective on sense of urgency around the current grading scale. So let's discuss the pros and cons of planning day, and we'll bring in people to provide more information.
Okay.
Do you want to do motorcycle since you asked them to wait and amend the agenda?
Thank you, by the way, Rob, for
You're
your
welcome,
principal
Jeff.
report and our follow-on discussion on both the grading system and our proficiency-based evaluations. I would, considering our audience here tonight and considering the time, I want to move the motorcycle driver education agenda item up to next, and then we'll follow on after that with our board and task teams and our CCSU board update, and then our 3rd quarter, just to keep things moving here and be respectful of our visitors this evening. So we've had earlier this evening, in terms of our motorcycle safety course, we heard from the Laternos and the J&J training course on motorcycle safety. Ms. Charbonneau, you're here this evening to address this topic also, right? So, what we'll do is we'll welcome you to hear your statement and then have our board discussion after your topic.
Come up here to do this, right?
Yes.
So first of all, thank you for your dedication to doing this. I'm a Burlington educator, and our school board meetings are looking a little different than this right now. So for you to be able to come and talk about educational stuff is really nice for me to see, so thank you. And for you, of all things, to be talking about motorcycle classes at a time when, you know, education is the thing we should be talking about, thank you. My issues have nothing to do with motorcycle classes. I'm a motorcyclist myself. I love motorcycling, and without that class, there'd be, that's not the argument at all. The conflict I have is that my yard is right there, overlooking the parking lot where they have the motorcycle classes nearly every weekend all summer long. And this is an endeavor that my family's been working on for 3 years through the maintenance department. And just now tonight I find out that these guys, this is the first that they heard of it. So with a little bit of conversation, maybe we've solved the issue. So had we had the opportunity 3 years ago to meet and converse, then maybe you could be doing something different with your school board meeting right now. So thank you for that. My issue is only about my ability to sit in our yard, have a barbecue on Mother's Day, enjoy what we've set up as our relaxation place. That is it. Has nothing to do with the value of the class. I don't mind giving up a couple weekends, but you know, there's not a whole lot of weekends in Vermont, and we have a beautiful backyard with an in-ground pool that you can't use in January. So it's just of the utmost importance that we can at some point take advantage of what we've created by our hard work. So that's my statement. That is it. That's as simple as it gets for me. But we did have a conversation about coming up with some alternatives. If that's something that you'd like us, if you'd like to hear what we talked about, or you guys are going to talk about this. I don't know what you do now.
Thank you for your statement. The board gives me permission. I'd like to hear if you've come to some kind of resolution or some kind of ideas to go forward, as this board is willing to hear what those ideas are.
So you want to help me do this to make sure I don't mess this up? The first question, and I think Bruce Murdo has addressed this, is of course if the motorcycle classes could move to the other parking lot so that other neighbors could complain, that would be good. I kind of feel like we've done our share, but I believe that there's an overflow issue there, and there's some issues, but if they could just move over there, they could have motorcycle classes as much as they wanted. But the agreement that I think we came to is that they could limit the classes to Saturday classes, and they would only have 2 Saturday classes, which would mean 4 Saturdays.
Throughout the summer, right?
Throughout the summer.
So instead of a Saturday, Sunday weekend course, it would be 2 back-to-back Saturdays, allowing Sundays for quiet time.
So then we'd give up our Saturday, those 4 Saturdays, and then they would have classes during the week.
So that was in the talking points. Those were some of the concessions that
I'm not
were
sure what Joanne
included
had
in
put
the
in her
talking
points, but-
points.
And I missed the talking points. This was a side conversation, so.
What time would classes during the week happen?
It really depends on, what we're told. JJ's willing to do whatever we can to make it work. Our hardest thing is we didn't realize that she's been complaining for 3 years. We didn't hear about this until I believe January or February. So we're certainly willing to do whatever it takes to not disrupt the public. So I know on Sundays we used to start earlier. We were asked to start later, so we do. Saturdays we're willing to start a little bit later, but because of how long the program takes, a 9 o'clock start time is preferred for sure.
How long is each session? So you start at 9, what time do you get done?
It depends. Typically, it's like an 8-hour day in a parking lot. So it depends on how many. It depends on how many students we have. Sundays aren't as long, but we do the licensing exam at the end of the day. So we're still there. There still is a bike running. It's just not. Part of what she mentioned too is some of our instructors instructing students can be loud.
They yell over the motorcycles
Right.
so that they can hear them, which means now we have all of the motorcycles plus the instructors yelling.
Which shouldn't happen anyways. We weren't aware that it was happening. The way the course works is if a student needs coaching, as instructors or rider coaches, we are to pull them aside and talk to them face to face. I know when I was learning how to ride, if I was trying to weave a cone and somebody was yelling at me, I'm looking at them, I'm not looking where I'm going. So it's definitely not the correct practice, and we can assure that that won't happen anymore, for sure. We weren't aware it was happening, so.
And they also said that they wouldn't have Harleys anymore in the class.
Yep.
That's a really bad weekend when you have
Yep.
a boatload of Harleys show up to take classes.
We do have motorcycles that we supply. They are, I believe, like 200s or 250s, 1 and 2 cylinder little bikes. But the bigger bikes, if they're a noise issue, then we'll take care of that noise issue.
Sounds like you're maybe going to have a little more oversight going on.
Yeah.
A little better understanding of what's going on at these classes. 'Cause
Right.
It's you've made reference a few times to things that you just were not aware of.
Right.
Which
And a lot of it is because, like Joanne, the lady that was here, she is a proprietor for J&J. Her and her husband Doug bring the motorcycles here in the morning, and then us as instructors, they leave, and then we take over. So because she's never heard of complaints, she hasn't had a need to be here and watching her instructors. We're all nationally certified. I'm nationally certified to teach and instruct in every state. So it's not something that she's had to really monitor in the past. But we know now that needs to happen. She needs to monitor every single one of her rider coaches and figure out who's raising their voice and who's not following guidelines the way they should. And it's in her bylaws. It's unacceptable.
So I guess it comes down to what you guys can do to help us come to an agreement so that
I know the farther side parking lot definitely works for us. I think it's been brought up here before as us moving over there. However, I believe because that's considered overflow parking for sporting events, possibly. I can tell you as a rider coach, the amount of weekends that I've spent here in the last 2 years getting certified myself and then teaching myself, I've never seen more than 5 or 6 parked cars on that parking lot while we've been over here. So, they told us, I believe, before it was overflow for baseball. The baseball fields are more over here, which to us would make more sense to have this as an overflow parking lot for baseball.
So some of the concessions we heard earlier from J&J was to only ask for 6 courses during the year and only allow 8 students per class maximum, and to stop offering the advanced course.
Correct.
And to offer a couple of courses during the week, which I just heard as another accommodation
Yep.
to accommodate the noise issue on the weekend. And to have 2 courses be on a Saturday, only if Sunday is the cause of the noise issue, or start at 10 a.m. on Sunday. And if you're going to go back to back, it would be July 5th and July 12th would be back-to-back Saturdays, as well as August 2nd and August 9th.
Yeah, and we had talked about the whole July 5th thing because it's, Independence Weekend.
Right.
they do
So,
Memorial Day, Mother's Day, and
Right.
4th of July.
so we talked about possibly limiting those as
Want to come
well.
for a barbecue?
That would be something that, Joanne, she runs the business. I'm just an instructor. I'm just here on her behalf because she had to go home. She's really not feeling well. But
Yeah.
Well, I know, like, Labor Day weekend, for example, the day of the tractor pull, you can have anybody do whatever you want in the parking lot, so it just doesn't matter, so bring them in.
So, so the 13th, 14th, and 15th are weekdays.
Yeah.
So maybe you could do it on a Saturday and a weekday.
Yeah.
So 6 sessions is 12 days, right?
Right, and I think she asks for 6 weekends.
But she didn't tell me 6 weekends.
Well, because typically
that
we
was
don't
before.
we don't usually fill 6 weekends. So we ask for 6 in hopes to fill 3 or 4 of them. The state has a program as well that we, basically what happens is a lot of students go to the state. Those students that need more of a one-on-one coaching then come to us. So we don't fill the weekends like the state course does. So, but I believe my understanding is that she asks for that many weeks, not actually expecting to take all those weeks.
And then in the past, I've worked with Bruce. Bruce has given me dates when he knew that there was motorcycle classes. Unfortunately, with the flexibility that they have, that means that they might not have it one weekend that it's scheduled, but have it a weekend they haven't been scheduled because they could fill it. So that's not real. We hope that, they would give me some weekends that I knew that we could have the yard, but that's not what worked out.
You're asking for prior notification.
Yeah, if I knew ahead of time when that was, and it wasn't changeable. But what I have found is that because of the flexibility in the program, they book them all, and then they might not have one, but then they might need that weekend they didn't book. And that's always been an option.
That's how it gets.
Well, it's a little different of a request than what came to us at the last meeting, which was to identify 4 dates to help with the transition of the program. So we reviewed the dates that she thought were available, that she requested for availability. I just don't know how you guys have reconciled it, because I'm still hearing 2 different things as far as Saturdays and Sundays and
Correct.
weekdays, and I don't want the board to have to take this amount of time figuring out dates.
Right. Yep.
Is it too much to ask them to define the agreement
Of dates.
of dates and bring that back to the board?
That would work for me as long as we agree on what we agree on, and not that there's 6 classes and 12 weekends.
Right.
Sure.
If you're willing to take a stab at it, I mean,
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
It would make our job a whole lot easier. We're in a mediation phase here.
So maybe
It's still better than the Burlington School Board meeting, so
Yeah.
take it.
We try.
I think we can do that.
So here's my observation on the board is that this has been a communications quagmire since day one.
Right, correct.
J&J hadn't been getting emails. Ms. Charbonneau, you were here earlier and then hadn't heard anything.
Correct.
We have sidebar conversations that the board isn't aware of yet. The administration's telling us here's dates that we know, because we have to do, for example, maintenance in the summer on our parking lots, right?
Right.
So you don't know that.
Correct.
Administration knows that, so there has to be a 3-way conversation here. And frankly, this is not an item that the board typically takes action on, okay?
Right.
So I would ask that the 3 parties, and Superintendent DeNova, you kind of chair this amongst our citizens who are affected by this, J&J who wants to provide the course, and believe me, as an educational institution, I'll speak for this. I understand we provide driver's ed in our high school here. I see motorcycle safety absolutely as an extension of that. It's a service. You don't have to sell us. We know that this is an important thing for our community and our end users. But when this training occurs, it's something I would like to recommend to the board. We remand back to administration and have administration come back and say, this is the agreement that the parties have agreed to. Everybody can work with and around these constraints, and we can move on.
That works.
Yep.
That
Okay.
works.
And I don't want to hear I couldn't get emails, or it's been 4 months, and we had a presentation back in October. We're here in May, and we still don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, I would admonish the 3 parties here. That's an unsatisfactory way of addressing this.
Right.
And I'm speaking out of frustration because I really am tired of this issue. Not that I don't think it's important, but I think it's something that's simple that should have been solved a long time ago
Yep.
without really the board being involved.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, so Superintendent DeNova, if you can take charge of this, you know what issues we have from a facility standpoint, and I appreciate that at least we've got a dialogue going on here. Now let's just get this darn thing resolved, okay, and move on.
I'll
Deal.
make contact.
Maybe we can
Thank you.
get your email address.
Just bring us
Yes,
a
we can do
motion.
that.
Bring them over. We can do that.
Okay.
So-
Thank you.
I'll be in contact.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So, just on this item tonight, we did have this as an action item tonight. I would recommend that we, I would like to move that we delay any further action, board action on this, pending the report back from the superintendent on the resolution between the affected parties and our properties, and come up with a schedule. I don't know if anyone else feels this way, but I feel pretty strongly that this is the way we should go, but I'm willing to entertain anything else. Okay,
That's-
thank you.
okay. Sounds good.
Is that an actual motion?
Oh, yeah, everyone approved.
There, good, got it.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Thank you.
That's the mirroring side, yes.
Yes, I also am noticing we have a visitor to be heard, who actually isn't really a visitor to be heard, but we have a friend of our board and a friend of our community, Representative Linda Waite Simpson from the village here. She was gonna present on item number 11, the legislative update. I would like to move that up right now too, so Linda, we can be respectful of your time and offer this up to you for your just presentation. Thank you.
Would you like me up here or?
Oh, right, front and center, of course.
Right here? Okay. I brought some papers, of course. We have to
great.
cut a force down in Montpelier to make sure everyone's informed. So there are two things here. You could just take one and pass them on, Judy. You've already seen them. I mostly wanted to come in and just give everybody an update on where we ended up on the tax rate. The tax rate is, as was presented to the community back in April. However, there were some alterations to how the legislature got to that tax rate. And so one of the significant things that happened was the base amount was actually reduced by about $100. The effort here was to try to lessen the cliff for income sensitivity. So folks who drop off of that cliff have actually seen the largest increase in their tax payments per income of any other group. So the 90 to about 150,000, that really kind of middle class group has had the largest increase in their education tax over the last 5 years. So our efforts were really to try to loosen or lessen the burden on that group and try to shift it around within the household income group. So what we ended up with was not what we started with in the House, but we did end up with a 98-cent tax rate. And what I wanted to do mostly was just point out the large piece of paper that you have has the historic view of what has happened with the education fund and with the tax rates over time. So this is really just to give you context of where we've been and where we are right now. Where we're going next year is we are looking at another 5 to 8 cent tax rate increase, the base rate. Next year we are finally going to have the information that the legislature will need to be able to extend income sensitivity past the 90,000 range and really extend it up into the higher income brackets, so that we will be broadening that group. It will shift that whole group around a little bit, but, you know, there has just been a cliff with, you know, 2 people working in a family, and it's not hard to get to $90,000 in this community. And so, although we have close to 70% of the people in the community do pay their education rate based on income, there's at least some kind of a rebate on the full tax rate. For many, many people, there's still a big chunk of people who are paying the full Monty. So we're really trying to deal with that and trying to work through this without disrupting the entire system. There are people who would like to just get rid of this altogether. We just haven't heard any really good any good systems that we could put in place to replace this that meets the equity test that was mandated in the Brigham decision. So, you know, we're always looking at ideas and ways and whatever. One of the things that I would ask you all as school board members is to be thinking about unfunded mandates, and lots of them. It's been my swan song in the legislature, and you know, there are lots of things that we tell people to do that we think are, you know, greater public good, and so you take that step and you do it because it is the right thing to do. Doing them without knowing what the price tag is going to be is my issue. I really would like to know before we pass these things on, you know, what's involved. So one of the things that we did include in the miscellaneous tax bill this last year that we just closed out was a provision that any unfunded mandate that exits the Education Committee or any other committee will have to go to appropriations for an analysis, and if it's something that the full body feels that we need to ask for an appropriation, an additional amount to be put into the ed fund, the body can vote to do that. And so that's kind of where we left it. That said, there are some things that are coming at you this next year. One of those is the retired teacher health insurance issue, which has been paid out of the core fund of the pension account in Montpelier, and it's just draining the account. It's getting to be at a very unhealthy level. So this was an agreement made by the administration, the treasurer, Vermont NEA, and I believe the School Board Association was at the table as they were doing these negotiations. So for every new teacher, beginning next year, for every new teacher into the pension system, there will be, it's about $1,000 assessment each year for their retiree health insurance. So people who are already in the system, it'll be covered the same way it is right now. So that's one unfunded mandate. We knew it was coming your way, but it was, unfortunately, it is not going to count towards your education costs. It has been exempted from that, so it's a cost to the community, but not doesn't count towards your capped spending amounts. So,
I've got a question.
Sure.
One of the things that I've been particularly interested in has been the fact that it's difficult and time-consuming for our own district here to accumulate all of the unfunded mandate costs to the district. And considering a report to the taxpayers for the subsequent years going forward, that those unfunded mandate costs be identified. Now, one of the big ones that's coming is the dual enrollment. 2016 looks like it'll cost us, since we only get half from the state, about $400,000. And then the following year, well, it's only another $400,000. But I think the question I have is, now wait a minute, what sounds like a good idea has a huge cost at the community level. And that's just one item. That doesn't include salaries or any other cost increases. So we're not looking at double digits anymore. We're definitely looking absolutely double digits going forward. That being said, could you please tell me, when I look at dual enrollment, and Brigham may not have colleges that are competing for her to come to their college, and a community doesn't have the resource to even sign up for dual enrollment, how is that equitable and fair for the rest of the state of Vermont? I mean, when I look at Chittenden County that has all these colleges and schools surrounding them with a student base, that's one thing. Shifting the cost to us is a big, but how is that equitable for the rest of the state?
Well, we do have a state college system, and we also have CCV campuses all over the state. And we do try really hard to make sure, particularly those first-generation students, have access to these classes while they're in high school, because it's really an aspirational program.
understand.
It is, so.
But it's travel time, it's cost.
Right. I mean, that's true of anything outside of Chittenden County. There's always going to be that factor. And, to the extent that you might be able to do online classes and get credits, that way, I think, those are things we need to look at. But,
Well, maybe this particular one, because of the cost implication for the district and the taxpayers, should be put back to appropriations. It's one of those that is, I can see this thing just spiraling out of control in terms of cost.
well, it could. I mean, the legislature also funds, the state college system and CCV and Vermont Tech. And, I mean, those are all tax dollars. They may not be in your budget, but they are still going to those institutions. So, it's shifting where the money's coming from in a very small way, but I think it's still all tax dollars going to support those.
Well, these are not
institutions.
free dollars.
No, nothing's free.
No.
Nothing's free. It's not free when, when we have a kid who doesn't,
Yeah.
who's not encouraged to reach their the potential, and then,
I understand.
what happens in
But,
our.
but we're dealing with a few numbers of students now, and it's a 400,000 for each of these two next coming years, and it's going to increase. So we
Well,
don't have
these
the,
next 2 years, I believe the state is paying for that.
for half, and 2016 would be half.
Right.
And then after
And
that,
then
we're on
it's,
our own.
you're
So
on your,
that's-
yeah.
That's a $400,000 bill at half. So we have to be careful here,
I understand.
but I'm
I mean, if that-
concerned. I'm concerned about our financial viability and ability of the community to pay this rate of taxation going forward.
I think as a board, if you all want to direct your representatives to bring this to the attention to repeal the dual enrollment piece, that is something that, we would certainly do, and we would bring it up. I don't know if it would have legs. I mean, they have fought really long and hard to get this program going. It has been around for a few years anyway, and the funding has been a problem. It's.
I wonder if it's not an appeal to end it, but an appeal to perhaps explore the supplemental fund.
That's
or
absolutely, I mean.
Extend the timeline so that we'll have more financial modeling, so we can predict more closely what those local costs may be.
Those are great ideas. I think it's really important that we hear this like in January because, by May, it's really way too late to be bringing them up. But that kind of issue and ideas on how to solve it or resolve it or to alter it to make it, something.
I haven't quite figured out that when it goes over to local responsibilities, is there going to be some consortium that's responsible for negotiating the? I mean, right now, it's negotiated by the state. the fee. It's an
Right,
average
right.
of the state
Right.
and an average of UVM, and UVM is kind of taking a hit on some of
Yes,
it.
they
They're
are.
kind of
They
bringing it in, and that contract is to go to 2016. 2017, I think they've committed to. But that also then brings it to the expiration of when it's 100% local.
Right. So I don't know the answer to that. I would be happy to try to get the answer to that.
Because then every tub's on its own bottom, and if we
Right.
have to go out
Yeah.
and
No,
begin
I-
to negotiate,
Absolutely.
it just seems like a bad timing.
Yeah, I cannot imagine that the Agency of Education would not continue to do that negotiation, but I who knows? Stranger
Yeah.
things have happened.
And at the same time, we may not want to be subject to a negotiation that doesn't bring into our leverage, our geographical, proximity to
proximity,
a certain
right, right.
institution that,
Right,
so it has a lot of complexities
yeah,
to it.
yeah. So we can certainly bring those things up and try to get answers. Those are not something you would see necessarily in statute. They would be more in the rulemaking after the fact, but.
There's also, I know this isn't real. It's just one of those things that has an awkwardness to it, but as it goes from dual enrollment and it says, okay, you're now allowed to have 2 courses.
Mhm.
You're now allowed to have 4 courses.
Right.
You're now allowed to have 6
Right.
courses.
Right.
It begins to raise the enrollment numbers in the state colleges, which now begins a new funding model from local communities into state colleges, which can decrease the amount of state funding that goes into state colleges.
Well, I hope it doesn't. I hope it's in addition to, because the state colleges have really been,
Yeah,
I mean,
but
they are.
it just has an awkward, it has that, there's a way to legislate almost like a different funding model.
What would you recommend?
Well, it just has a coincidence to it. As we're moving to this pre-K kind of no boundaries,
Yeah.
in which there will be from your kind of sophomore year on, there's almost going to be no boundaries into college. There'll be an appetite, especially here, that if you offered 10, 12 free courses, you'd have people taking them.
Right.
Right.
Well, is it similar to advanced placement?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's similar to that. My understanding is a lot of the colleges are not even taking advanced placement. The courses that are offered out of Princeton don't necessarily align with what they offer at UVM. The curriculum is not aligned. So you may take the course here, but you don't get full credit for it there. So maybe there are better ways to do that kind of advanced placement, but do it as a dual enrollment.
Yeah,
and,
that may be curricular, that may also be economic too.
I think for some universities it is strictly economic, but we looked at the UVM, their curriculum and how it aligned with AP, and it was
Yeah.
way off on
Yeah.
every single subject, with the exception of one or two classes. So, kids take AP here and they think, wow, I'm going to get 3 college credits, and guess what? They might get 1 or 1.5
Yeah.
if they're lucky. And so, I think it may be, time to re-examine where you are all at in terms of advanced placement. Is that something that dual enrollment might replace, within the institution?
How about the idea that at some point there's a pay to play?
Good luck with that argument.
Well, over a certain amount. If the
Yeah.
first 2 credits are there, that the third course is at a 70-30 share, or
It's interesting, when you get into the area of public schools, and we had a huge, huge debate and quite hotly debated issue around whether dual enrollment should be made available to religious schools, to places like Rice, and then even beyond that to the secular private schools. And we kind of fell on the sword of, these are public dollars through public schools, and that's where they should stay. And it was, not necessarily the most popular decision, but we felt that it was important that, that was part of it. So I think there probably still are going to be costs. I mean, kids are still going to have to buy textbooks, and they're going to have transportation. There will be costs to parents to do that. But when you look at the cost of, if you can even get a semester's worth of credits under your belt, that's a good close to 20 grand for a lot of places. And it's, when you do housing and all that, it's, it's expensive. So I think those are certainly great questions. We can bring them up. The legislature has really pretty much tried to protect the public education piece of that, and not ask for participation. We did consider allowing the secular private schools to come up with, the state would do their half for the higher education piece, but that school would have to come up with their piece because they were not getting the taxpayer, they were not in that taxpayer system. So, so there may be some ways to do some workarounds, but I think by and large it'll be a publicly funded system.
Well, certainly want to thank you for your knowledge and discussion here. It still doesn't alleviate unfunded mandates.
No, it doesn't. It certainly doesn't.
I think we need to project forward, longer term, where this is all going for our school.
Well, and I think
for
it's,
taxpayers.
It's important for you all to have discussion as a board and for, administration to weigh in on what are things that we can check, and those are the things we need to be able to go back to the legislature and say, we need to get rid of these mandates. They're not moving our students forward, they're not getting us what we want, and they're a cost item in our school. And I think that, it's really important to have that conversation with the reps and the senators at the beginning of the legislative session.
I think it's kind of unique. We're in a unique position because with 83% of our students going on to college,
Right.
it's a huge number of potential participants at other local colleges and costs. Yeah, it's a big
Yep,
number.
it is, compared to the 100 or 125,000 in debt that,
Right.
parents are accumulating for their kids going through 4 years of college.
Right.
It's, you have to try to, look at what students are accumulating in debt and what their parents are having to come up with to pay for these things. And I'm sure you know quite well what that's about. I do
A good
too.
unfunded mandate to tackle would be to come up with a good viable waiver process for Act
153/156, as far as moving all our special educators into the SU
Right.
and creating
Right.
an additional bargaining unit. And our SU has submitted that waiver.
I know.
And any support for that would be appreciated.
So here's another idea, which is I presented to the Prudential Committee as well, and I do think it's time to have this conversation again. We still, we did in the House our mandatory consolidation bill this year. It did not go, it was so late out of the gate that it did not make it over to the Senate in time to really be considered there. We still have a voluntary consolidation program that's available. It's got tax credits. We, at this point, if we were to get involved, we would have 3 of the 4 years of tax credits available still. I would encourage you all to talk to your communities and, raise the issue again, because I do think that it's one way to get around that. If you have a singular school district, then you don't have to be bargaining amongst all these units. You have a contract for the district, and it's everybody. So that's another way
Yeah,
to
so we
get
put
through
that on the
point.
agenda for the SU
Okay.
board on May 27th, so that people can be refreshed on the process for forming reds. And we can review what that could look like. And also, I spoke with Superintendent Andrews about the fact that we've been remiss in the last 2 years about scheduling a legislative dessert. And we will be scheduling one again in November before the session begins, so that all board members can meet with our legislators to follow up on some of the unfunded mandates. And I'll encourage all of you, I think I'd asked Ben Dickey to send you the final education legislative report that just came out on Friday. It is a great read as far as understanding what the final outcome of the legislative session was this year. It raised still more questions for me, so I'll be following up at our superintendent's conference. Spring conference is this Thursday and Friday. I guess the most outstanding question I had was back to that question of the Vermont Strong Scholars and Internship Initiative. Again, that's not a new mandate. That will be exempt for the Joint Fiscal Committee to have to review it before it goes into effect. Okay, so that and the universal pre-K and the new teacher.
Those things are, yeah, so this will be, the mandate, unfunded mandate deal starts in July 1. So anything that comes
After.
after that will be reviewed by joint fiscal. But we do get fiscal notes on a lot of these things. The pre-K, I think first year out of the gate statewide was $800,000, I think. There are maybe a third of the communities in the.
We're close there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing this for so long in our
Mhm.
community. Did not seem like an unfunded mandate from the perspective of where we're at with that
Yeah.
issue.
It was that new teacher piece where
Yes,
the
yeah.
estimate was 1,072.
Right.
And we would be waiting for the NEEP results because it would be based on an actuary.
Right.
And that, what I didn't know was that it was an FY13 estimate was 1,072. So what we would anticipate, I'm still uncertain about as far as what that calculation
Yeah.
would be because we have to wait for the actuary.
And that doesn't come out until much later in the year because it comes out of the Federal Reserve System. So I'm thinking it's going to be October or so before that
we'll have
number's
that
available. Yeah.
information.
Well, the
Yeah.
impact of that is so different going forward than it is in our recent past.
Yes.
Because we're gonna experience across the state massive turnover of our teacher population
Right.
in the next 5 years, just through retirement.
Right.
The demographics.
The
Right.
demographics. I mean, from a fairly stable population to the idea of like, oh, $1,000, $1,500 for every new teacher, you know, our recent past would say, oh, okay, that we can handle that. I mean, the number of new teachers that we handle a
Right.
year is manageable. Our future,
Not much.
we're going to be seeing,
Right.
you know, dozens of new teachers coming in, and then that per year coming in. So it's sort of,
It will have an impact. It absolutely
Yes.
will. But having the pension fund go bankrupt is, I don't think, a very good option either. And that's really, you know, this was negotiated back in the early 90s before the state was really seeing the huge increases in healthcare costs.
Mhm.
And I don't think anybody at that point really anticipated that it was going to be, you know, I mean, it's $28 million a year that the state's paying for healthcare there.
The question I have on this, Linda, is the legislature telling us as a school district that this is something we have to do? We can't even make this a topic with our association in terms of negotiation? I understand, it's
Yeah,
gotta
right,
happen,
right.
right? But is the legislation saying this is something that the
I don't think
boards
it's-
have
yeah.
to pay? Or is this something that can be used as in a association, school board negotiation? Understanding it has to be
Yeah.
addressed there, but
I don't
is there
think-
some kind of shared cost?
I
or-
don't think it's a negotiated item.
It's not a
I think
negotiation, so
it's-
this is something that the boards
it's
are
a cost,
expected to do in
right,
it.
right.
And is, to reiterate, I'll say it's $1,000 in FY13
Right.
per year, per teacher. Right.
For new teacher into the system, so
A new teacher into the system.
somebody who's coming from another school in
Right.
Vermont who's already in the system
No,
would
but
not.
I want to be clear,
Yeah.
a new teacher comes on board, and on July 1st of 2015, we would pay $1,000, and $1,000 for the year, for the next 30 years that teacher
Right.
may be working in our district, we would have to, this is not a one-time deal, this is.
It's every year.
It's every
Yeah.
year for every new teacher coming into the system, okay?
Or new to Vermont teacher.
Right.
Well, that's coming into the
Right.
system,
Right.
right? So, and it's not something we can negotiate with our association, you're telling us, it's a mandate on the board.
On the community
On the
to
community.
support that, right. I mean, there have been efforts to move the entire pension out to
Right,
the
right.
local communities. And the argument is that it truly is a legitimate education cost, and we should see that in, in what we're doing in our budgets. There's been a lot of resistance to that because the state has paid that wholly, for decades and decades. So, but the health insurance piece may be something that we're able to fix.
Is that
as
health
we-
insurance on the Health Connect?
It's,
Is that
the teacher's retirement, it's, part of the self-insured VISBIT.
so it's not part of the Health Connect?
No, Health
No,
Connect
we've
does
been
not,
grandfathered.
Health Connect does not do large groups anyway. Health Connect was never meant to go over, groups of 100.
But there is a transition to Green Mountain.
Whatever that is.
Yeah,
So-
single payer system.
So,
Yeah,
this,
just my 2 cents on
Yep.
this is I think when you talk about unintended consequences, I think, personally, I think the way this is gonna go is all these things are gonna start adding up to the point where what is going to suffer is our budgets will fail.
Mhm.
We will be forced to come back and we will have to cut educational programs to fund these things. And of course, that is probably then when there will be a gigantic uproar, and I'm assuming then some sort of cascading changes will happen.
Mhm.
But I guess
I hear you. I mean,
It's very
I've
difficult because it's,
I've been where you're sitting, so I know exactly
you know,
what you're
I
talking
just-
about. I do.
That's what's frustrating about it.
Yeah, yeah. It is. I mean, it's, the sad fact is that statewide, we have lost a huge number of students over the last decade. And we have not lost staff, and we all know how that works. You lose a few students, you don't necessarily lose a teacher. You don't lose your overhead costs for certain. So, we've just, the incremental cost per student has just pushed the system so out of whack. And I don't know how to fix it short of getting more students into the state because, it is just, it's crushing. I mean, it truly is crushing. It's the single largest appropriation out of the state. And even then, it doesn't, there still is the local contribution on top of what the state puts into the ed fund. And
But we're still trying to address it on a scale of averages rather than on the scale of issue. It still is that issue that the state in a proportion has lost a huge amount. We are still, we in this district, we in this county
Right.
are still
Stable.
fairly cost effective.
Mhm.
Our school, this district, was one of the few that met challenges for change.
I know.
Our average over the last 5 years has been, relatively, 2.2?
Right.
2.2,
Yeah.
2.5%, maybe.
We still see things of tech tuition, sort of the first bump in the last 4 years of any consequence, and that's like $400. So, but what's happening is the just tremendous amount of pressure and sort of negative wave on being responsible here to try to almost exert pressure on the places that are seeing, $22,000, $23,000 cost per pupil. And
It's a real problem. We tried to eliminate, we were successful in the House actually eliminating the small school grant, which a lot of us felt unfairly subsidizes tiny schools, but doesn't take into account the fact that we try to keep our class sizes small to maximize learning opportunities. And, what is the difference really? And why are we subsidizing the one but not the other? The Senate did not agree with that, and I do think we need to ask our Chittenden County senators in for the legislative event, because they need to hear this from you as well. That to me was almost a penny on the tax rate, and certainly was something that I just don't think we need to continue to subsidize schools that that can't make it on their own. And so Some of the ideas that I've heard have been, well, if we've got communities where transportation is not a huge obstacle, but you have 4 or 5 really tiny K-8 schools, would the state be willing to set up bonding to build a central, new, energy efficient, built for 21st century facility, so without putting that out onto the local, property tax, as a way to try to help, ease the transition into maybe a community losing their small school. And so these are just some of the ideas we're going to have to bring forward and to talk about and to encourage. Until we get our Waterbury complex rebuilt, that's not going to happen because just about every bit of the bonding right now is going into to repairing damage from Irene. But certainly, by 2017, we need to be looking at how we can, as a state, make this an affordable thing for communities and do the right thing by students too. I mean, I hear stories of the kindergartner up in the kingdom who's the only 5-year-old in a school, and he's placed in a multi-age grade where the next youngest kid is 10. And that's the classroom. A 5-year-old in a classroom with 4 or 5 10-year-olds and a couple of 12-year-olds, and it's kind of the single room schoolhouse. And, parents are not necessarily happy about those choices. So tough issues. In the kingdom, they will just say, just leave us alone, let us do what we want to do, and just don't bother us. So maybe more of us need to be saying that to them. But I would encourage you, one, to look at the voluntary consolidation. It does have an 8-cent tax break out of the box on that the first year. You don't get it the first year that you do it, but once all of the transitions have happened, it comes into effect then. So it's 8 cents, 6 cents, and 4 cents. So it's certainly worth exploring. I know it's a tough issue. Some of you were around when we did this before, and
Definitely.
yeah.
I had my concerns.
But I do think that the town school board was there testifying before the legislature in favor of the mandatory consolidation. So it tells me maybe we're ready for another conversation with them.
The tax rate, the shared tax rate, that's still a concern because we're taking students from everywhere. I have no clue as what's going to happen with Westford. I don't think Westford knows. And if you had 200 extra students, where would you put them? I mean, we've been pretty disciplined in the town about not allowing construction and new development to go forward unless the capacity of the schools is examined and certified that it can handle that increased student load. And I'm not sure what's going on, but the shared tax rate is a little concerning. What if we got merged with Burlington?
Oh, well,
It would be an absolute disaster.
Burlington's its own. I mean, we were far, far out of the picture of being merged with Burlington or another singular. Because they're already singular school district. They just would not do
Yeah.
that. What they would have done is drawn the district lines around the town, and it would have been the village and the town as a singular district.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's what we would have been looking
Westford
at.
would have been part of that district,
No, Westford really was very strongly in favor of maintaining their high school choice. What they negotiated in that specific bill, and who knows whether this will come back, but what they negotiated was a provision where they could kind of go out on their own and do their own thing and contract for superintendent services separately. So
they're advisable.
they're advisable, and the whole issue of school choice is huge in this state. I mean, if you haven't been outside of Chittenden County to understand the independent school structure in the state, it is huge, and it's a big voice here, and it's difficult when you start trying to do one-size-fit-all school districts. And so trying to figure
Right,
out how you do,
right.
how you have a K-12 system where some people are going to go to the high school, the public high school, but then, you know, some communities don't have to. You know, it really, it's difficult, so.
You know, when I look at the scores and I look at the performance of Chittenden County schools, I see a fairly competitive, fairly equitable, well-rounded, well-organized, and executing educational services. Really good. But when I look at the scores from the rest of the state, it tells me a whole different story about.
And some of that's aspirational, some of it's poverty. I mean, there are just,
Right.
you know, there are lots of underlying causes in those
You know,
test
the-
scores not being.
The one size fits all just doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, I look at it and think, whoa, you've got to be kidding. Trying to move a mountain to correct a problem that isn't there.
Yeah.
It's like you
Yeah.
have a solution for a problem that doesn't exist
Well,
for a large number
just
of
to be
communities.
fair, being in the legislature where we hear from those other tiny little school districts who say to us
Yeah.
all the time, don't put Chittenden County structure on us. Just let us do what we've, you know, what we want to
Yeah.
do. So, I mean,
Well.
it's a two-way street. Trust me, I hear both sides
Yeah.
of that. So.
Yeah,
Linda, there's a couple of times in the legislature this year that it seemed like they were trying to figure out a little bit of how they felt about tech centers. There was some of the wording, some of the funding with the tech centers. Did you get any of that feel, or do you have any of that sense?
I didn't, I mean, it never emerged as a big issue. They may have been discussing it in the education committee. They talk about a lot of things in the education committee that stays in the education committee or ends up in those notes, but it never really makes it out to, you know, a bigger bill, so.
I think the thing you're talking about came out of House appropriations.
House appropriations?
Yeah, around unfunding the support for, or defunding the support for.
Oh, that was,
Yeah.
that was not out of appropriations. It
I'm
was,
sorry.
it was an amendment that was proposed by a single member to the appropriations bill, but it was withdrawn. It was never
Right.
even truly considered,
Right,
so. It
yeah.
was about the,
Well, it was
funding
technical
the directors and.
amendments
right.
they were just cleaning up the language,
Right.
and then it got some steam around.
That was one of the members
Came out of when it was-
presenting, yes. Yes,
Okay.
that's where it came from.
And
But
then-
it went nowhere. It was withdrawn.
And then
before
I guess,
consideration.
Leslie, I was just curious on whether there's any steam that might be around about money following the students on the school choice. We've got, we're at a cap right now, I think we're at 20?
Correct.
Right.
Is there some steam about money?
We've had this conversation, and there's so much contention around, you know, what schools would lose. I mean, it's kind of like if you think back to the
Zero
regional
sum
tech
game.
center
Yeah.
and
sum.
how all the surrounding schools were going to lose their
Light
students, they're
that.
going to lose their funding, and
right.
that's the issue. So to try to allow, I mean, we could possibly talk about lifting the cap, but then you still have to have those arrangements with other schools. I don't know what the answer is to that. It's, you know, for some schools it would be very beneficial because we have a great athletic system here, we have great academics, and kids want to come here. Colchester dropped out of that system altogether because they were sending kids out and nobody was going in.
Right.
And so, you know, you have a situation like that in that community where it's difficult to get a budget passed anyway, and then you now are losing students and the money's, you know,
Right.
going with them. It's problematic. So,
So what's best for kids?
what's best for kids?
Right.
It's a good question. I mean, you know, we've tried to allow communities to make that decision as much as possible. But it's just, you know, it ends up being a slog fight. Seriously, a slog fight in the legislature.
Well,
And you have, you know, people kind of lining up equally on either side of the issue. And we never seem to be able to move past that because it's a problem for.
I mean, the answer very well may be that what's best for kids is that the money doesn't fall. I mean, I'm not saying
Right,
that
right.
it's the certainty is one or the other.
Well, you know, if we have community-based schools, you would think that if, you know, parents are looking at where they want their kids to go to school, they would want to, live in that
Well,
community.
that's what I was gonna
That's,
too.
you know.
We have parents who live in Essex but wanna send their kids to South Burlington.
Right,
I question, why do you live in Essex?
right.
Because we have a great fire department, because
Yeah, 'cause we have two tax
plow
bills.
our streets, because we have a great library. I mean, what are these things that
Right.
attract someone to Essex if you wanna send your
Right.
kids to South Burlington,
Right.
you know? And that's frustrating for me.
It is. And
Well,
all
you
those
get the-
arguments come out
Right.
when
You
we're having
get
these
some
debates. but-
population too that can be the disenfranchised, that
Right.
don't have the involvement. And you can
Or
get
the transportation, or, there are all kinds of.
And I understand also too, we have to deal rightfully so with those situations where the changing demographics of our student population. One parent lives in one town, another parent
Right.
lives in a different town. Who's got jurisdiction? What's fair, what's fair for the student as these family situations change in their
Right.
dynamic? I mean,
Right.
absolutely, we have to deal with that.
Right. And I think our system does.
I think we
Do that
do
pretty
make
well.
those types of accommodations.
yeah.
It's,
I've always seen our administration bend over backward to allow families to try to figure that out.
Right.
Where somebody's not trying to game the system.
Right.
But there's legitimate,
Absolutely.
familial issue. So, yeah.
So the only concern I have, the only big concern is the excess spending threshold.
Right.
And the fact that this board may be close to it this coming year.
So what
for
is?
FY16,
I'm just curious.
with the way the formula has changed.
Well, but it's also changed for the K, so I'm just wondering where is the difference in the spending? Is it that much greater at the high school compared to the K-8 that you're gonna be hitting that cap sooner, or?
At the K-8 level?
No, at the high school, you said it's,
Right, because the high school is experiencing decline in enrollment.
okay,
Our K-8 system is not.
okay,
So we're losing students who've gone in the last decade from
12.
12 to 13 or 1298, something like that for this coming year. So that's the difference. So the high school feels that excess spending threshold or comes closer
Okay.
to it because of the decline.
right.
At least then I'm thankful that at least that teacher piece of 1,072
That's excluded from that.
is excluded,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that I appreciated. And I appreciated the House bill, quite honestly, on creating the pre-K-12 districts. I thought there was a lot of sound thinking behind that, and I appreciated the House reps being so responsive to requests from, I know, Superintendent Andrews and myself in support of that bill. And we'll continue, I think, as a SU to talk with our sister district to see what may be feasible and what lies ahead for the benefit, definitely, of opportunity for all our students. It just is an interesting quandary in having that conversation without the consolidation bill that I
It does.
so hoped
We're
would
doing
help.
this at the municipal level too, though. We have a town manager who's also filling in as a village manager as well. I think there are opportunities to do that on a voluntary basis. You have to certainly work out, your contract and make sure that, you've
Right.
got the services that you need. I do think it's possible. It's, it's
Yeah.
work. We talked about this when I was still on the board. We were going to look at every opening in the
Right.
SU and in the town administration, and when there were openings, we were going to try to see whether we could, combine those positions and share them. And do you know if that's happened in any
Well,
of
I
the?
know within our system, I'm the associate superintendent and the superintendent.
There you go.
And
There you go.
We had a.
There you go.
But those meetings
But how
are
did that help the town?
And our pre-K-8 special ed director is also the special ed director for the whole system. So we've done a lot of consolidation of
Within the
positions
SU,
within
but-
the SU.
But I'm just curious,
Yeah,
because this
across,
was really
not
supposed
yet.
to be the town's administration.
Right.
And, you know, the
Question
SU.
is, have you told Mark he doesn't have a job?
So, no, I think it's important to have the conversation, and I appreciate you prompting the boards to have that conversation. And the work you did on the consolidation bill, I thought in the House was very well.
Just need to do it in January of the first
Right.
year of the biennium. not
Right.
in May of the
Right.
last year. It is.
What are you trying to say,
I served on that committee for 2 years, thank you very much. I don't
Well-
sit there
Thank
any
you so
longer.
much.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
So,
Linda,
we'll
thank
talk.
you.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
yes.
Thank you for all your work.
Yeah. It's good seeing you guys.
Thank you, Linda.
Take care.
Oh, one thing I'd like to ask the board as we kind of wrap up and go on to some of our other topics is, I would like to see in part of our planning day in June then, from administration is what are those, for U46, and we kind of opened the aperture when we start talking about pre-K and CCSU kinds of things. I want to limit to U46 here, but what are those unfunded requirements that we're acting on today, and how much are they costing us? If Grant has put that to us, I have to admit, I have not seen it broken out that way as part of our budget process that we see year to year, but it would be useful. I'll take Representative Wade Simpson's advice here, and let's take a look at what are these unfunded requirements costing us, so that perhaps in the fall, when we do have a legislative discussion, we can be proactive and say, this, you're telling us we have to do CPR training, you're telling us we have to do, audits, you're
Annual
telling
audits.
us we have to do all these.
10,000 in your budget this year.
And you're not, you're telling us we have to, pay for new teacher, long-term health, retirement health care things, but you're not telling us how we're gonna pay for it,
Right.
And in the meantime, it's costing us X. I don't know what the list of items are, and I don't know what the value of X is, and that would be a useful topic to have at our planning session.
So you do know it for this year, because you remember the requirements that came forward this year were the annual audits, and you had to include $10,000 in your budget for that. And those
Let me just
things, so-
rephrase, if we could.
I will.
I don't disagree
Right.
that we should know, and I know for 2015, they've been identified, but they were broken out into different line items
Right.
in the budget. I would like to see those individual unfunded mandates broken out by the line items
Okay.
where they are in the budget, and put on one sheet of paper and say, here are the unfunded ones that we have to go after.
Okay,
Because there's an equality standards one too.
Yep.
Remember you called
Yeah.
our attention.
yeah,
Okay.
there's several PLPs, it goes on and on. There's like 2
Okay,
pages.
we are running very
Way late.
late here, and I'm interested in accelerating through this here. The reports from the board task teams. Al, maybe you can give a quick leaders at work.
Absolutely, very brief. It's definitely communications and leaders at work. Gary, I may ask if you think of something I've missed here. We've been spending quite a bit of time on the superintendent evaluation form, the new forms, and in the previous work as well. This is a major effort that is now becoming closer and closer to reality. It has to do with setting up the superintendent's evaluation model on a more of a real-world business model, where there are criteria for standards, work to be done, setting of priorities. We're pretty much on track right now. The next step, this is an 18-month schedule with multiple bullets every couple of weeks for the boards committees to look at. Next step, CCSU board approves the work plan, and then in June and July we have some milestone that we are going to be expecting from the superintendent. Now, very briefly, and because we have an upcoming planning session, with Judy's permission, one sheet that describes the annual work plan draft. On the left-hand side, and I'll just wait for that to be passed out. And I did copy it in color so we could all see what's going to be done here. On the left-hand side, where at the top it says 2013, 2014, that's the current work plan for the superintendent. And on the right-hand side, the 2014-15 is the new work plan. The green are items that are being carried over from 2013 to 2014. The red, except for the teacher evaluation, were being dropped. That teacher supervision and evaluation is also going over to the right-hand side. But the other two reds at the lower for communication and board visioning are being dropped. So one of the things, there are a lot of buzzwords in here, there are a lot of initiatives that are being discussed, but if, for planning day, if you see something in here you don't know or you have questions on, I'll try to answer the best I can. Send me an email. Sure, Judy or Jack can also help as well. One of the new buzzwords that's in here is MTSS. That's a multi-tiered support system for students. You're going to hear more about that. There's also the blue bullet at the top, proficiency-based learning, that's on here. But there may be other items you're interested in gaining more information on. But your representatives at the CCSU board are Jack, Brian, and myself. And we're going to be carrying this forward to the CCSU board to negotiate with the other boards this list of items and setting some priorities for the superintendent. So that's really where we're headed, folks. So if we have any concerns, questions, input, really would appreciate it. So, Gary?
All right. Gary, if you can talk community.
Yeah, we'll just kind of lead into that. We looked over what Al just handed out. We didn't get a lot done in the sense that one of the things we're going to do for the upcoming year was plan our monthly meetings, but we did not have full representation from all the boards.
Yeah.
So we kind of sat on that. We did discuss, I guess, somewhat related to the MTSS, and this was kind of student-driven, as I remember, about changing some of the disciplinary actions. Some of the students perhaps felt that it was unfair to those students who maybe do everything right, but also maybe implementing some kind of above and beyond what we're doing with kind of an early involvement system, or even a point system where things can accumulate, not to have a one problem knockout blow kind of thing, but get involved so that you won't have repeated offenses or whatever that might be. I think that's pretty much what we focus on.
Right.
In terms of that group.
Right. This is the first time we've really had some real clear visibility and negotiation at the various board levels as to where we're headed and why. And so it's a step in the right direction. I didn't cover a lot of the information on the evaluation system, but I can assure you that it's a good system, it's a sound system, and it has it provides the superintendent with feedback from the boards, and it's real world evaluation. So it's a big learning curve to go from the old evaluation system to the new one that's based on so much on business practices and best practices. But we're making that transition, and it's been a good process thus far.
Thank you. Thanks, Al, on Leaders at Work. Gary, is there anything else you wanted to say on communications? No?
That was pretty much it.
Okay, thank you. Aaron, can you fill us in just quickly with negotiations?
Yeah, basically we, at our last meeting, we kind of took a pulse of where we were at, and basically the committee gave the go-ahead for talks to continue in the small group. I believe there's 2 more small group meetings scheduled through like mid-June, and then we're just going to basically see how that goes. We're hopeful that that's going to probably wrap up most of the outstanding sections in the contract that are still being discussed. So it sounds like probably in the beginning of June we'll have more information on that, but it's still progressing pretty well.
Right. Okay.
Is support staff 15? June 15?
Support staff is now as well,
Okay.
because why wouldn't we do everything this year? And I can update that they are also interested in a unified contract. So we're moving forward with support staff with the same direction.
Okay. Brian, can you talk policy for us quick?
Yeah, our next meeting is Wednesday.
Okay. All right.
We had canceled our April meeting.
For negotiations.
For negotiations.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And then I will say for the CCSU board update that the executive committee have been meeting really on developing a lot of this annual work plan that we're seeing here, and that we will our next CCSU board meeting is next Tuesday night, the
Yes.
27th of May. We'll be having its reorganization night for the CCSU board. That's really all I'll just say at the moment here. Okay. Third quarter reports. We had in the org notes here, third quarter reports with a narrative for both CTE and EHS. Are there questions that were coming out of this on third quarter reports for the board? We have the data here. I'm trusting that everyone was familiar with what was in those narratives. And again, in the efforts of expediting tonight, if no questions, I'm gonna go ahead and move on that
Okay.
topic, okay? Planning day, next topic. We have our planning day is scheduled for June 18th coming up, which is a Wednesday. We have a couple things going on with that. Recall, and Liz, you're new to our board, but we have been doing for the past 4 years, I believe, the same annual survey of a board self-assessment. That survey is available online to take. You're new to the board. I don't know how much you can help, but you're certainly welcome to take a look and participate in that. Again, that if you were to look at your org notes electronically, there's a link there that you can click. I would ask that everyone have their board self-assessment surveys done by Friday, June 6th, which is next week, Friday. 2 weeks from Friday. 2 weeks from Friday, I'm confused. Because I will take the outputs from that data and put them into a result that we've all seen before, just how we have done this year, compared to years past, which will be a topic for our planning day. Okay. Also, we have some topics that we've identified for planning day,
Right.
and maybe, I don't know if Judy, you can briefly review for us what we have identified for topics for planning day.
Well, we have, I think it's 2 hours of AI training continuing.
Right.
So we have that piece. Then we have the unfunded mandates review, the grading scale, pros and cons, the annual work plan, where we find ourselves, because that'll be adopted by then, or with whatever revisions are in play. I heard folks say that they would want the presentation on proficiency-based instruction to occur in August. These are all pretty meaty when you do the AI, the board survey results, grading scale, annual work plan, and unfunded mandates. It's pretty full.
It's a full day.
Yeah.
And we're planning on that. Just a reminder, we're planning on that day to start at noon on the and go through till 8 o'clock or so
Yeah.
approximately. So
Noon to 8 right now.
noon to 8 is what's scheduled. So please, I ask you to check your calendars and in fact clear your calendars for those days. Dinner will be provided. We will be having it at Park Street School this year. Unfortunately, our Vermont Public Radio facility wasn't available to us on that day, so we weren't able to use that for this particular
Everyone
year.
makes their pledge by the 17th.
So we will be having it at Park Street that evening. If you know that that's a conflict, let me know earlier. The earlier the better. But I would ask that everyone make accommodations to be there for this important training day. Any other questions, comments about planning day? Okay. Climate survey update. Again, the school-by-school results of the climate survey are available electronically and posted in the link that was in the org notes here. But I don't know if Superintendent DeNova, if there's comments you specifically want to make about climate survey now. And
Actually, I think it might be best, given the lateness, that we have the principals maybe talk about these results when they share their action plans next month. And that way it's in context of the goals that you're creating in that section of safe and healthy schools. I didn't ask you first. Is that okay, though, to move in that direction? You're good with that? Okay. That way you can, as I'm watching eyes start to.
Right. Is it, for the board, is there anyone who's reviewed that data who has any questions and comments that they would like to make now on the climate survey results?
The only comment I had is kind of, Rob said that, 10% from students, basically to me makes that thing useless. I mean, 10%, it's just awful. Is the 90% who didn't fill it out fundamentally different from the 10% who did? Probably. It's just, at least you had like 80 or 60-some%. But I don't even know what you would want to do with something like that. I mean, data-wise, it's just, I don't think there's anything there. But it's my only comment.
I'm glad we had the participation that we did, but I do think we operate differently with our students than the high school does, in that we have a captive audience. They're with the same program instructor for a core period of time, so very much like a middle school. You could move them to the computer lab and say, we really need your help, and set up the time. So I wouldn't want the 80 to 10% to reflect.
No, I'm not trying, and I'm not.
I know,
There's no
but
blame. It's just,
I understand that, but-
statistically, it's like,
Yeah.
and I've dealt with this in my own studies.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's like, okay, and I don't know if there's anything we can do. Pizza day and computers. I don't know, but there's something to get higher than 10%. I said I don't envy your job of trying to make sense out of any of it. But that's my comment. It was just, I saw that, I thought, oh no, that's just.
So that's the
Good point.
challenge is, for the high school, how do you, what services, what things do we need to change to increase that participation? I don't have the answer to that.
That's what I said, I'd formulate goals around increasing participation, not reacting to results that
Right.
are
Right,
10%
right.
of our population.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Thank you for that observation, Gary. Anything else on climate survey?
No.
Right. So next we have our community engagement event. We've passed around this evening some cards. I don't know if everyone got one, but we did have a community engagement card that was put out. Liz, maybe if you can, for the board and for administration, you're just brief where we are with this, that would be helpful.
Sure, so, we sent about 72 of these out through the mail to a list that we created at our last, session that we came up with. We have a much larger list, that's getting an electronic invite to the event. And I think that what we need to do now is to send a follow-up if anybody has a list that wants to send out a little reminder. We've only gotten 3 RSVPs so far to which is linked to my account. Rob has some others that came directly to him. But a lot of people don't RSVP. I don't think that means that people aren't going to be there, but my recommendation would be for people to, I think everybody has a link to this graphic, and if everyone could just send out another blast, a little reminder to people to either please RSVP or please plan on attending if they can. That would be fantastic. Everything else is pretty organized, I think, for the event. The food is arranged through Bob Clifford, and anything else about that night? I think that's it. It's outreach now. I think we need to do a little outreach push, and you'll hear how that's going. I'll keep you updated as the RSVPs come in and let you know what that's looking like during this week.
For our viewers who might be watching on RETN, can you just say where that information can be found if they want to look online and RSVP back?
Yeah, sure. So this is the event that we're having is the community conversation about communicating an entrance to unlimited possibilities. It's about working with the CTA campus and the EHS campus. You can find information about this on the EHS website, on the CTE website. It's linked there. And again, for RSVP, it would go to myself, lsubin at ccsuvt.org.
And when and where is the
And
event
it's
being
May,
held?
thank you, it's May 28th, Wednesday evening from 6 to 8:30 at the Essex High School cafeteria. Light refreshments will be served, and we hope to see you all there.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Any other questions about our engagement event? I know this board has spent a lot of good time through our appreciative inquiry process to craft what we want to do, how we want to engage the community, and as we progress down our vision with where we're going with this is an important step. And so thank all the board members for your active participation on this.
I'd like to say one more thing, which
Sure.
is that this is sort of a precursor to an event that's coming in June of 2015, and you'll all be invited back as a community to take place in a larger appreciative inquiry kind of workshop for the community. So please come and see what it's like. This is a taste of what that's like and what that kind of process is, and how you frame questions, and how you can engage the public. And again, we'll be bringing the community back together in June of 2015. So save the date.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions about the engagement event? If not, we'll move on. We have the consent agenda. The warrants have been, I haven't seen them make their way around, but I'm trusting that
Yeah,
they're
they did.
okay.
Oh, thank you.
The meeting minutes from April 14th, recommendations for professional appointments, and approved leave of absence request. I want to just, I know Superintendent DeNova, you've given me some additional information that there are additional requests for recommendations for professional appointments, right?
Would you like me to review that?
Absolutely. If you could just review two new ones than what had been originally submitted.
So you already have Pam Hemingway for the Curriculum Development and Curriculum Coordinator position. And with that comes the leave from her current position. And Peter Falby is the new addition, and Jeffrey Jefferson Goodrich for the athletic director position, and that also comes with a leave of absence from his current position. And then the new one is for Peter Felby, is the position for CTE of agriculture, natural resource teacher. Because of the expanded program this year, CTE is able to increase their enrollment by offering a second strand of this course. So there's no predecessor there. And then Sean Thurett, who has been the long-term substitute for a math teacher who had to leave mid-year for health reasons. And he's done an outstanding job, and CTE would like to continue having him be their math teacher next year as well.
Okay. Do we have a need to pull any particular item from the consent agenda? Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda with the inclusion of the additional professional appointments?
Okay, so moved.
Moved by Al. Do we have a second? Second by Gary. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion to approve the consent agenda passes 6-0. What agenda items should be calendared for future board events? We've talked already, I won't go through them again, but items that we'll be we're planning for our planning day on June 18th. We've talked also about.
Are we using the planning day document at all? The one that was set up?
Oh,
board.
good point. I think, I don't know. I have to confess, I have not looked at the Google Docs planning day document to see what's going on.
Let's
Frankly,
revisit that.
we need to go back and look at,
Mhm.
has anybody populated anything with it? Has anybody looked at it?
I looked to see what was in it. There's nothing in it.
There's nothing there? Okay.
Easy to cross-reference that.
Yeah.
I filled it.
You filled it out. Okay.
Okay. I would ask Superintendent to know over those things that
I'll
we've talked
check
about
on that.
tonight, that we
Mhm.
can start populating what's going on there.
And for the June, your next board meeting is a carousel board meeting. For those of you who are new, this is all 16 school board members that will meet here in this location for our shared learning opportunity. There'll be a presentation on the multi-tiered system of supports that you're starting to see in school action plans and annual work plans, and to give you an overarching understanding of that. That night, that board meeting in June is very much so dedicated to our school action plans, and your principals will play a key role that night in walking through their accomplishments to date and their goals moving forward. And the date is June 7th. Is it 9th? 7, 9. I've got it right here. I think it's in the orgs. It's June 9th.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay. Any other items that should be calendared for future board meetings? Hearing none, we'll move to the next topic. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
9:15.
Well, we don't need a motion. I can just adjourn this
Yeah.
meeting at 9:15 this evening. Thank you.